Hello, crafty friends. I have my first installment or first month of my perpetual calendar to share with you today. So I'm doing September, and really what I'm trying to create is a birthday calendar, which is also what a perpetual calendar is. So you don't put your Monday to Sunday, you just write down the numbers and then you put the birthdays next to their date, and then you can reuse this calendar year after year. So I wanted to create myself my own, basically, a customized birthday calendar. I did originally look for one to buy and I didn't like my option, so I thought I'd make my own. I have a setup video that I posted way back in April, so I'll put a link below, but you can check that out as far as I talk about the size of the papers and the dimensions and my numbers and everything else as far as my measurements, I should say, in that video. So you can refer back to that one if you want to create yours yourself. My choice for this one is to be in watercolor. So I'm specifically using my Daniel Smith watercolors and my Schmincke artist grade watercolors for this. And that is because they are light fast. I want this to last for years and years and years and years. So I will be using basically just my Daniel Smith and Schmincke's for this project. Other mediums you could use, you could easily use Copics. That's an artist grade. You could also use, any sort of your Prisma pencil crayons or something like that. I'm pretty sure your Inktense Derwent pencils will also work, but I would avoid your Tombow markers or the Real Brush clean color pens or anything like that, or your student grade or entry-level watercolors. I would avoid all of those. If you wanted, you could do this in acrylic because that should last as well, but really choose your own medium. Whatever you want to do, you can change it up every month and customize it to your own liking. Personally, I like to watercolor and I'm going with watercolor. So like I said, this is for September. And you can see at the top, as I've already been going through, I have mixed up some colors. So the gray I'm using on the bottom of my camper there is Daniel Smith graphite gray. And really, I'm just have two different consistencies. I have a watered down version, and then I have a more concentrated version, which is where I'm getting the dark and the light. The top half of the camper, you can see it's like a very light gray. That's actually with my Schmincke's, and I mixed cobalt turquoise and burnt umber, and it came out as a nice warm gray. I reckon it would be about a W3 in your Copics. So I'm actually trying to match the camper we actually own here. So you could definitely change up the colors, but this is our camper that we own, and that's why I wanted to color it this way. And the stamp set for this month is Flora and Fauna. It is the pop-up camper set. I really like this set. It's very cute, and I like the idea of a camper being, surrounded by bush, but the bush is just giant, huge flowers. So I had lots of fun coloring this, and this video is about 30 minutes long, as you can probably tell, and I've sped it up 4 times. So it was about 2-hour project, really, start to finish. There was a lot of stopping and starting as I went, but that's including the calligraphy and all that sort of stuff at the end as well. So I've got this all here, and it's just sort of sped up for you to watch and enjoy. And I am testing out the Waffle Flower Media Mat for the first time, as well as I'm filming this project. I really liked the mat to be painting on. I thought that was a really nice surface to feel. But I think I will go back as far as with mixing colors for my watercolors. I think I'll go back to my porcelain plate to mix colors on. It just seems to sit nicer on the porcelain than the silicone mat here. So but I think the mat would be perfect for re-inkers, distress ink cubes, and all that sort of stuff. So it's really great that it's still there. I'm definitely going to use it, but maybe not with my my Schmincke's and Daniel Smith. So here I'm actually mixing up some other colors. I'm mixing up an opera pink, which is a Daniel Smith color, and lemon yellow, which is a Schmencke. And I'm also mixing Daniel Smith quinacridone coral with the same lemon yellow. And I'm mixing a quinacridone coral with the opera pink as well. So I'm just getting 3 different varieties. And then as I go, I will change the consistency by adding water. I wanted something that's a little bit more orangey, which is your quinacridone coral. And I'd make the opera pink and the lemon yellow make a really vibrant, like beautiful pink without it being too a warm pink. You'll see. So this color here, which is quite orangey, is actually the quinacridone coral and lemon yellow. And then I'm putting a undercoat, I suppose is the correct word, on the larger flower on the right as well. So the one on the left is going to be more orangey, and the one on the right will eventually be more pink. And I'm using just a heat tool to dry in between all the layers. And then further on, with the greens and everything else, I picked a few Schmencke's to color with, the Prussian blue, and the phthalo green, and then a Daniel Smith was the sap green that I was using. So I sort of mixed the 3 greens as well, just to get a variety of greens, since in nature it's not all the same color of green. So yeah, so I might just put some music on and let you guys enjoy the painting and coloring, and I'll pop back when I get to the end. So I just wanted to come back in and just talk a bit more about the supplies I'm using. So as far as the paintbrushes I'm using for this project, I am predominantly using the Black Velvet Silver number 4 and 6 in the round style. And then for the fine work, I'm actually using a Pro Line number 0. So just so you know, I'm using basically a 0 round for the detailed stuff and then a round 4 or 6 for the remainder. You'll notice with this style, especially with the heat gun coming in, that I'm leaving my hard edges while I'm painting. So it's a style that I really like. It's very loose sort of work that you can do. So I wanted to enjoy this. It really works for your shadows and adding a bit of texture and layers to the painting as well. So I like that effect. It even has a little bit of that storybook feel to it. So and the perfect way of getting that is to use your heat gun. If you want like smooth, like soft, like smooth washes and everything else, you'd be more looking at, gradually, like probably to avoid the hard lines, you'd be more wanting to dry naturally rather than using a heat gun. But that was what I was going for, so it made it actually quite a bit easier to work on. As far as the paper goes, I'm using Arches hot pressed watercolor paper. It's a very nice smooth paper and easy to stamp on, which is the perfect sort of thing for, because all of my images I've stamped out all the months and they're all stamped, so it's just so much easier to stamp on the smooth paper. This paper is also the 300 GSM, so it's nice thick paper that doesn't curl very easily. Even with my heat gun on it, I had very minor warping, and I can easily just run it through my die cutting machine with some pressure to flatten that out at the end. So I wasn't too worried about any of that. The waffle flower media mat in behind, that's actually heat resistance, which I absolutely love. So you can just go ahead and use your heat gun. You don't have to move the paper away from your surface or anything like that. So that was definitely a plus. One thing I do like about these wells at the top here is the fact that they're white. So you can see the real color as I'm painting. I knew exactly what I was going into. I do use a white porcelain plate other times, and I think, like I said, I was probably going to go back to that, but I have also like the Tim Holtz medium matte, which is like a tan color that I use to mix my paints on. And while it's great for mixing paints on, it is really hard to see what the colors are until you get them on paper. So I do have a paper towel off to the side that you can see me dabbing and blotting when it gets a bit too intense. So I'm using that to blot with. But as you have been watching me, there I go there. I actually use my left hand to pull off the excess moisture from my brush when I put it into the paints, and I'm testing it to see how much is actually in the brush. I am at that point just sort of running it along my hand on the left side. I just find that so much easier. It's more of a feel test rather than putting it onto, I know a lot of people will use paper towel, but I never know how much is being absorbed into that. Whereas on my hand, I can easily tell if, what the consistency is. Is it too thick? Do I need to lighten it? Do I have too much just, paint in the brush for what I'm trying to do, and sort of wipe it off on my hand. So that's my tactics, and I don't know how that started, but that is definitely what I do. And the pipette on the side, I find that really easy for adding clean water to my paints like you just saw me do. So I'm mixing up the greens there, which was the Schmenke Prussian Blue, Phthalo Green, and the May Green from Daniel Smith. So I'm moving on to the leaves, as you can see. Just trying them out a bunch of colors. I'm sort of dropping in some blues and everything else to change the varieties of the colors, and I've swapped to my 0 paintbrush here too, just because the stems are so much smaller than the leaves that I was just working with. The other point to note, like, because I was going for that hard line edge, using a slightly larger paintbrush sort of makes it harder for you to be as precise, which is kind of what I was going for. Like, it's not a loss of control, it's just you get uh, bigger lines, or you can possibly get bigger lines and all that sort of stuff. Here I'm using the graphite gray, the Daniel Smith that I use in the camper, just as a bit of shading behind the different layers in the petals to bring that out. I fussed and fussed with the flowers. They weren't quite vibrant enough, and then I'd come back and do another layer, and um, I wanted them to be very bright, and the camper sort of to fade into the background, like you're sort of have to look for the camper. So I wanted the flowers to be the focal point, so I kept coming back and back and back, and you'll keep seeing me doing that. And I fussed probably for too long, let's be honest. But this is a calendar that I'm going to keep year after year, not a card that I'm sending off that, will be looked at for a while, and well, hopefully more than a while. But this is something that I fully wanted to spend the time on, and I was enjoying myself. I was playing with my colors, I was playing with the mixing of everything as well, and just trying out the combos and everything else. You have noticed a few times I've pulled out I've done a bit of a color swatch on 12 different colors. I have a lot more than 12 colors, but I sort of just picked out some colors that were interesting to me that I wanted to test out. And the lemon yellow is amazing to put with like your cobalt turquoise, and it makes a really vibrant, like neon green color. It's quite amazing. Same with the opera pink. It was this gorgeous pink color. So you find these combinations when you do these test charts, and you would have never known you could create that color unless you do these test charts. So I was very glad that I spent the time and did it. I really need to spend more time and test out other colors and see what I can create and make. For mine, I just did like a grid 12 by 12, and on the bottom left half I did a darker version, and then I watered it down and did the same colors but in watered down lighter version on the top right side, sort of thing, so you could get like two different tones of the same color mixture, sort of thing. So like the pastel and then the real color. So here I've sort of moved on to the grass section. At first I'm trying just doing wispy stuff off to the side. You'll see me soon putting the shadows, and they're a bit too blue for me. They almost look like there's a pond. So I spent forever trying to fix them. But anyway, that's fine. It worked out in the end. I'm quite happy with it, but you'll see me fussing and trying to blotch up colors and things like that because I wasn't quite... They're too intense and too dark for the painting, and here's my blue shadows. It ends up looking like a pond. I'm turning it sideways just because I find it easier to drag and to create the soft edges when I'm dragging the paintbrush. Just sort of that, I don't know, the motion is easiest for me when I'm pulling it towards myself. So I'm getting that nice soft edge naturally without having to blot it up. So here's the lake starting. And in a little while I'm thinking, that is way, way too much. Then I'm blotting it up, and I add a bit of gray to it and then a bit of green to it, and it's been a while fussing with this part, but anyway, I do like the end result. So I do like the shadow off on the left flower. I like how I pulled that off back to the side. I like that. But I think my light source was a bit wrong too with the camper. So that's all right. These are all learning things, and I'm the only person who's going to see it, in my house. Well, my family will and everything else. And I'm probably the only one who will even notice, and everyone else will be like, "Oh, that's a really nice." So here I'm adding in some grass because I'm thinking, if we're out camping, there's going to be grass. We're in a meadow or something, and there's super big trees. And so I'm going to start adding in some grass with my number 0. And I'm liking the effect, but as I'm going, I'm thinking, I got some really humongous flowers going on. Shouldn't I have some really humongous grass? Like, you know, doesn't that, in my brain, I'm starting to think about the actual scene and the proportions of my grass that I've put in and everything else. So you'll see me taking a very big, bold move and dragging some big grass across. And I think I get a little bit carried away, but I like the end result. The camper sort of tucked in behind this, you know, oversized, garden meadow sort of scene. So it wasn't exactly, I was sort of picturing it more as a clean and simple, but in the end I get this overgrown garden scene, which I really do love. So it's quite interesting how, while you're painting, it will slightly evolve, or what you're trying to create will slightly evolve. So I think that's really, the fun part about watercolor. Here's my big grass. And so far I'm liking it, and I'm thinking, oh yeah, let's keep going. So I do. And I'm just dragging the paintbrush up and then ending and like lifting the paintbrush so I get that nice soft end on it as I come up. Then I'm adding some blues, so it's not just a solid green, so a bit of color variation here. And then I think, oh, I should add some more because it looks so good. And I keep going, and then I'm thinking, I do like it at this stage. I probably should have stopped here, but I was having a lot of fun making my grass. So the next thing I'll be doing is, right there, adding it behind the camper, and I'm thinking, oh, I shouldn't have put it in the center. No, this one should go in front, and then it'll look like it's tucked in behind and everything else. But I am enjoying myself here at this point and having fun playing with my grass. Aside from that, you'll notice that I've got the water off to the side. I've got one dirty water and the one next to it is clean water. So when I'm rinsing off the brush, I'm using my dirty one. And then when I go to put more clean water onto my brush, I'm using the other one. It just really does change the color of your paints when you're using clean water versus, sort of muddy water by the end of it. So it's definitely worth having a couple jars. I'm almost at the point where I want a third jar, because I get to the point where the first one gets too dirty and then the second one starts getting dirty, and I'm like, I should really just have a third one. So here you saw me, I put clean water along some of the grass because it was a bit too vibrant compared to the rest of the scene. So I was just letting it sit there for a few seconds, and I lifted it off with a paper towel just to remove some of the vibrancy of the color. And then I've gone back to add a bit more color to the stems of the flowers because they're getting a bit lost in the grass. And then here I've gone and said, oh, the grass is now the focal points. Now I've got to add more color, more intensity back into my flowers. So this is what I'm doing here. I'm trying to have the light source in the top right-hand corner, or off to the right, I should say. So I'm shading it more in the bottom left side. Really, I'm just fussing. That's what I'm doing here at this point. So just trying to get all my perspective and depth into everything and try to make sure the focal points are still the focal points and everything else. So I'll just put a bit more music on until I get to the point where I start to do the calligraphy. Okay, so that's all the coloring done, and I'm moving on to the calligraphy. I am using my Jane Davenport Mermaid calligraphy pen. You can see here I'm just not getting much out of it. So what I did to get it moving again is I just dipped it in hot water for like all of 5 seconds, and that got all the ink moving again in the pen. So a good tip, anyone who hasn't used their calligraphy pen for a while. As far as the calligraphy styles, I found the font in my Creative Lettering and Beyond book that you saw me flash there. I actually have another month off to the side, which I filmed ages ago but never uploaded, and will get in there. But I'm just trying to go for consistency, making sure that I'm doing the same thing on both months. So I'm making the wider part of my letters on the downstroke. So, and I've gone and done all the numbers as well down the side. So I'm sticking, it's a black ink that's the same Davenport ink that came with my mermaid pen. It's really nice to use. I'm doing this last just because I do know that from prior experience that if you get water drops or whatever, this ink will bleed a bit. So it's to be done last after all the watercoloring is done. So here I've done everything in pencil beforehand. Just it's so much easier to get out the pen and just sort of fine tune it with the pen if you have a pencil, guide essentially. And then I'm using a Copic multi-liner in warm gray. It's the 0.3 size. So off camera, I took a ruler and I just hand drew with pencil all of the lines at a 1/4 inch apart. And then here I am tracing them with my Copic multi-liner. I didn't want perfect lines. I wanted it to be very much a handmade look, but I wanted them to be relatively straight. So that's why I put a pencil guide down first. And then I'm just freehanding it over top without using a ruler. It gives me the freehand look with a bit of accuracy. So I've just gone through like that. I'm using my crocodile on the small size to punch out the hole at the top, and then I let it sit there for like a half an hour or more before I brought out the eraser. So this is just a white eraser, and I'm just slowly erasing all my pencil marks from underneath and my guidelines that I've put in. I also used, normally I would use a pair of jeans if I was wearing jeans to clean off my eraser, but in the end I used the sand eraser that I have. This thing is amazing. I just found another use for it. Cleans off my white eraser, so I don't get like dark smudges and all that sort of stuff. So it was very, very handy to do this. And it's always the best part, I reckon, of this whole thing, cleaning, like erasing all the pencil lines and all your guidelines, and suddenly you have this finished product that, looks great. And I love this stage. It's like when you're pulling off your masking paper after you've been stamping and everything else. It just comes out looking ever so nice. So that's it. That is my project right there. I put a little ribbon through the top of it and I hang it on the wall. I am using the sand eraser there was a few little water splashes of clear water that left a slight mark. So I'm just tidying up the paper and getting that in there. So that just finalizes everything. So here it is, my final project.